Well, it's because if you're trying to drive in this weather, so now the snow is really coming down. But let's take a look at the snow on the ground. It's really fluffy snow out here, and it's already really hard to drive out here. When we were driving here, we could barely brake for the red light. It just kept sliding. So if this freezes overnight, we're going to get even more slick, icy road conditions. And especially for bridges, they're made out of concrete, so they freeze fast and thaw slow. Cold, wet, and snowy conditions will continue into the night. And traveling through Portland in particular could come with an added danger if you're crossing a bridge.
Maybe the road you're on is slushy or not so bad. You get on the bridge or you get on an overpass and it's frozen, whereas the road you were just on is not.
Shelley Snow with ODOT urges caution because conditions can change in a second.
Perhaps you're used to driving a certain speed over a bridge or an overpass or along a road. But in these kinds of weather conditions, that goes out the window. I mean, you cannot drive that way. You have to make adjustments.
And unlike open roads, bridges have little room for error.
Hitting an object that is not movable, and that can be very, very traumatic.
Snowplow crews spent the day preparing for those icy conditions on roads across the city. How do we prioritize which roads to hit first?
That's kind of a hard one. So ODOT does have a level A, B, C, D type thing. Usually based on the commute, at least for the Sylvan section, this hill is usually problematic because of the elevation and the amount of traffic going in and out of Portland.
ODOT says they do pay extra attention to problem areas.
Bridges have a tendency to freeze up quicker because there's nothing underneath them. So yeah, those are kind of a priority. Keep an eye on those.
Now, snow plows will be out for 24 hours as long as the storm is happening, but the crews will be rotating every 12 hours.
Well, Kelly, the director, says the biggest lesson learned is increasing communication, using tools like social media to direct people towards resources such as warming shelters, and also encouraging the public to stay off the roads to help ease the burden on first responders right now. Now, this comes after the agency received criticism during the heat wave earlier this year.
Governor Brown declared a state of emergency for Oregon. Now, the Office of Emergency Management tells us they're working to connect state and local agencies, creating opportunities to share resources as needed.
What were the biggest lessons or takeaways from the heat wave that you're now carrying into winter severe weather?
I think what we saw in the heat wave, and quite frankly, what we saw last year during the winter storm and the ice storm in February, was how important it is for neighbors to check in on neighbors, right? We know we don't have enough firefighters or EMTs or social service providers to be able to check on every Oregonian that may need help.
OEM says they're working with community agencies to make messaging accessible to vulnerable populations as well.
What will you be doing over the next few days to tackle this?
Obviously, stay in touch with the National Weather Service. These winter weather forecasts can change pretty quickly. But so far, the folks up in Portland at the National Weather Service and Pendleton and Medford and out in Boise, been really accurate with what they've been able to predict. So we want to stay in touch with those folks and make sure that we're acting upon the best information from a weather standpoint that we can.
The agency is also directing people towards 211 to call in and learn more about resources just such as how to get supplies and where to stay warm. Deb, Kelly, I'll send it back to you in the studio.
And Megan, this was a big issue during the heat wave 6 months ago. Did 211 make that shift after the heat wave this year?
Yeah, Kelly, it is a change. Before, people could not call in 24 hours a day, but now that line is fully staffed for people to call in at any time, including on major holidays such as Christmas Day. Yeah, Evan, although the snow didn't cause too much trouble in Portland, people are now looking at those freezing temperatures forecasted for the rest of this week. There are 5 emergency shelters open across the city, but the Joint Office of Homeless Services says that might not be enough. They're currently focused on opening the convention center as early as tomorrow. And if you take a look online, you can see the volunteers are still needed for the days ahead.
Look at that face.
Tamara Hessler walked more than 2 miles with her shopping cart the night of Christmas in an effort to get ahead of the snow. She's one of about 200 people that sought out emergency shelter space in Portland this weekend.
I got stuck last year in the snow, so it scared me this year that when they said there was a blizzard coming or something like that. I don't watch TV or I don't have access to it, so it's just word of mouth. And I just didn't hesitate. I just packed what I could.
This shelter in Mount Scott opened on Saturday. When the 5 current shelters reach 80% capacity, the county plans to expand, utilizing spaces like the convention center.
What is your team doing to make sure these sites are accessible?
Well, so we've got them geographically distributed, right? So if you look at the map, that's why we have 5 sites. We want them to be accessible to people based on where they are in the community. And then we have a great partnership with TriMet. TriMet is making it free for anyone who is riding TriMet to get to a shelter.
The Joint Office tells us they spend all year getting supplies ready, but finding staff is tough this time of year.
So what are the hurdles preventing this space from opening up sooner?
Yeah, right now, it's really important that everyone give what they can. And we appreciate everyone, especially with the holiday spirit, giving those donations, warm socks, warm jackets, helping people however they can. But it's also really important that if people can, and if they're vaccinated, that they give of their time and they volunteer.
Once open, this space can hold about 100 people.
We do it one day at a time, and we're very intentional about opening the right amount of capacity because we rely on community volunteers to come in and staff these shelters along with county staff and city staff and other public agencies.
I also spoke with these agencies about the challenges of keeping people out of the cold while also battling the public health concerns that come with the current surge of COVID-19. I'll show you how they plan to balance that coming up tonight at 6.
Through many different bureaus and organizations, the city of Portland has given out millions in grants to help owners to get them through this difficult time. But many of these grants have certain parameters that owners must fit into in order to qualify for the money. And an owner I spoke with says he's applied to 15 different grants from the city, county, and state, and has only been approved for one grant worth $5,000, but he's out more than $1 million.
The gentleman broke through this window, peeled back my hog fence security wire, crawled in here and knew exactly where to go.
Dealing with break-ins and thefts is a nearly monthly occurrence at U.S. Outdoor. Ed Arenello is the owner. Each of these reports tell the story of another theft.
It's one thing to be facing a pandemic and following all those rules and being safe and keeping the public safe. It's another thing, the lawless disorder that's going on that is crushing our businesses.
Arenello's store has been serving shoppers in Portland for 35 years, but the store's location on Northwest 14th is new. He relocated there after being looted during the 2020 riots. But despite changing his location, he's still dealing with frequent thefts, break-ins, and damage. All of it adding up.
I could easily say that the calculation in the last 2 years exceeds $1 million. In revenue.
Prosper Portland is able to help a bit with this. They offer a repair grant for businesses that have sustained physical damage like broken windows, doors, graffiti, or sign damage since March 2020. A spokesperson says they've given out more than $700,000 to more than 200 businesses, equaling out to a couple $1,000s per business. U.S. Outdoor is one of those businesses getting $5,000. And while it's something, it's not nearly enough.
You're applying for all this aid and you're seeking it out, and you're on the hold for hours, and then it doesn't come. So I feel that it's out there. I'm glad it's helping some people, but I'm not sure it's helping the most needy.
So will more money for owners like Arenello be available?
Great.
Sean Ullman with Prosper Portland says that all depends on the city.
In order for this program to continue, you would need the city to allocate more money towards you. Is that right?
Essentially, yes. If the program is going to continue beyond, say, June of this coming year, 2022, then we would need to go back and ask for additional funding.
The city's budget for next year does not show any money set aside specifically for business grants. So we went to the mayor's office with our questions.
What exactly is the city doing to help these businesses that are still struggling after all this time?
Yeah, so as mentioned before, there's the release of funds through the American Rescue Plan Small Business Navigation and Technical Assistance, which supports businesses in helping with their capacity building, knowing that they've been struggling or had to decrease over this last 2 years.
Sarah Finney Allen is the Director of Jobs, Housing, and Economic Equality in the mayor's office. In addition to these funds, the Oregon Worker Relief Fund helped provide repair grants. But despite all this help, they say stories like Arenello's are unfortunately common in the city.
There's been a lot of efforts that the city and the state have done and the federal government to try and support businesses, and yet it never feels like quite enough. And so that's why that constant communication with them, depending on the emergent needs of the moment, is important.
One way businesses can communicate is through the Portland Action Table meeting. It happens monthly. During December's meeting, part of the discussion focused on whether more money needs to be given to businesses through the repair grant. But it's too soon to know how much money, if any, will be made available yet and what the parameters around getting the aid will be. But until that's figured out, owners like Arenello are stuck in a tough position.
After this last weekend, I really have to reconsider what I'm doing in life, and I have my employees to think about.
We wanted to see how much money the city of Portland has allocated for businesses since the pandemic began. It totals more than $15 million, with more coming from the American Rescue Plan next year. We have a breakdown on where exactly and how much money has gone out so far on our website, KATU.com.